Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news for Wednesday, July 17th. You know, one of the problems with labeling a series video game news and then only streaming 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, gets kind of highlighted now that I think about it. In that news typically is Monday through Friday, probably Sunday also, very often every day. Sometimes 24 hours. So last stream I tried a thing where I just jumped into the video game news and didn't do any Yu-Gi-Oh at all until much later in the stream that I felt like I played one game or two. I'm going to, I think, try that again today. Now inherently, I will say that I only got like 5 views in the last stream and the watch time didn't seem particularly any longer, but you know, this probably is the way forward. I don't know if I will stick to it in the long run, but particularly since I'm just in the middle of this emergency. I'm not even going to call it a medium emergency now. It's just going to be drawn out so much that it's just a full proper emergency. My time is just getting limited more and more. And on that aspect, at any point in this stream, I'm anticipating that I might be interrupted and just have to end very quickly. So again, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and jump into the news. So we have our peak concurrence on Steam DB to show off here. Banana still in the number 4 space, but this Once Human either has changed its thumbnail or it has jumped up even higher, beating the first descendant. We finally are starting to hit a point where we're starting to see new games, and so my desire and hope that people would talk about Stellar Blade more at the end of the year as far as Game of the Year is probably going to be crushed, as all of a sudden there's just enough fervor for newer games that did actually manage to come out in the same year. For the catch-up section, I made, I think, exactly 1 episode of Islands of Insight. I mostly took a break. The Amazon Prime Day sale, I think, is probably over now. It may have just a few more hours, but for me, it's pretty much over. Way over budget this year, but I kind of knew I was going to do that just by buying the SwitchBot S10 robot mopping vacuum cleaner. I knew that immediately was going to push the budget over. Also bought a new cell phone and plenty of other stuff. Surprisingly though, I will say for Prime Day, even though they probably made it better overall, they didn't really do anything for video games. I was watching slickdeals.net, I was watching Amazon Prime Day's lightning deals. The lightning deals this year did not have timers on them like they have in the past. Very often you'd get a lightning deal and it would only last an hour at most, or until items ran out. This time all lightning deals seem to simply be when they run out of stock. Plenty of things marked up way too much, so you'll have something that says it's 98% off, but if you look at it on camelcamel.com, you'll see that the price tracking on there indicates that it actually just raised the price right before the sale. Not a lot of good sales overall. I mean, you could certainly get I got a micro SD card, 1.5 terabyte, very big micro SD card, 8 terabyte hard drive. There is a weirdness certainly on getting hard drives now. First of all, I think I did see that they're now more generally selling 10 terabyte hard drives. Still not really at a reasonable price. You pay too much to have all of that on one hard drive. But I also feel like there is a bit of a difference. There used to be a much wider difference between hard drives that you would put in a PC for a gaming PC or just for general, this is a storage backup, and then hard drives that were designed specifically for DVRs and NVRs, in the sense that you connect them to security closed circuit television, CCTV, security camera systems. Ones that are designed for just a lot more writes. I don't think there's perhaps as much of a difference now, and I think when you start getting into above 6 terabytes in a hard drive, they're all just getting labeled as either NAS hard drives for network attached storage, or as security camera class hard drives, which I guess in a PC you now they would just look for a NAS storage, although that is certainly for your second hard drive. When you're buying an actual hard drive, because your main computer, you'd be pretty insane to see if you built a computer without an NVMe for your operating system and for running the games you're actually playing. And so in that, you're also admitting that very few people need hard drives at all, unless you're just going to have a massive amount of games installed and you didn't mind them loading really slow on a hard drive, or you're making video footage like me and trying to back up as much of that as you could. Here we can see the first Ascendant is trending on my chart down further, and even Once Human is trending downward. Apex Legends seems like it might be bumping up higher. But yeah. I got a monitor to replace my broken monitor, and if you're not picky on that, you can get a cheap monitor, a cheap small monitor. Didn't really see TVs, didn't see video games, didn't see game consoles, didn't see accessories. Those things, I imagine, do just sell fine by themselves. And so with that, alright, well, I'm hearing some movement here, so I'm gonna have to pause the recording just to start with. So I'll be back in probably several minutes. Okay, I'm back. Well, the good news there is that with that distraction out of the way, that makes me considerably less likely to run into any other distractions today, although the odds are very high. Bad news, of course, is you're in the middle of streaming and you take a 20-minute break. Let's see, Life is Strange Remaster here is being advertised on the top of Steam. The Fighting Fest is now being promoted. Outlast Trials, and I wish Atomic Heart was still a little bit cheaper. It's rated very positive these days. I think perhaps the price in part has helped that. I suppose for part of the catch-up section, I should also mention, on top of playing Islands of Insight to do one 2-hour very long episode, I'm also watching the anime version of Danganronpa, which effectively is just Danganronpa 1, as far as I can tell. I'd be very surprised to see if there is even a significant amount of new animation in it. There is a little bit, but then there is also, clearly, having watched the first 3 episodes that cover the first case, just a lot of the video game element that you actually would need to possibly know how to win the trials that happen in Danganronpa. To quickly explain it, it's a weird Japanese game where kids have to get away with murder or they're going to be trapped in this school forever, and if somebody does commit murder, then a trial is held and the jury of the other kids have to figure out who the murderer is, otherwise the jury gets killed. So it is a death game mystery visual novel that's really perhaps not as horrible as it sounds in its cartoon silliness, and the way things are animated. Steam Deck is back at the top of the top sellers. I did see one thing on Amazon Prime. There was a brief time there, and it may be the sale is still going on, where you would get some percentage back on gift cards. So theoretically, you could get GameStop gift cards, maybe get $10 back, but it really looked like you probably could only get one $15 GameStop gift card to get $10 back on that. So not really a significant amount of savings to then potentially go to GameStop and buy a Steam Deck, probably used. There is still this hope, I think, amongst many gamers, myself included, that we'll start to see OLED versions of the Steam Deck be sold refurbished. If Valve got to the point where they could be completely done with the LCD versions, then they could focus specifically on the hardware of the OLED versions and whatever the next version is going to be. Baba's U at $10.49 isn't a terrible price. But yeah, there's really not a good offering on that. Sure, on the Prime Day sales you could have gotten the right size of NVMEs, the really small ones that would have fit inside of a Steam Deck to put more storage in it. But that's not even the main problem with the Steam Deck OLEDs. It's not the storage size that's the problem. The problem with it is the software. Really, just still needs a little bit more compatibility, and it still needs a little bit a lot more work on the desktop mode for that to be a proper sales point. Yeah. I also saw an article, and maybe we'll see it today, maybe we won't, saying that it is estimated that Valve only employed like 75 employees in the last year, which, you know, that is kind of believable. Totally makes sense. It certainly explains a lot why Valve doesn't make more games faster. It would explain why the Steam storefront doesn't evolve as fast as I think it should evolve. It certainly explains why there's just like no curation of what games are allowed through the Steam Direct program. But that kind of, if that is the truth, it also probably highlights that there's probably a ton of money that's just going into the pocket of the founding class, the senior class of Valve. Yes, that would be Gabe Newell, but it would also be several other people. And yeah, they may, as a private company, not be reinvesting. Of course, if they're not reinvesting, that may hurt them, but it would hurt them possibly decades down the line. If you contrast, like, if we just were to assume that Steam and Valve were doing absolutely nothing and not investing any of their profits into improving Steam as a storefront or Valve as a game company, well, you look at the Epic Games Store, they're not doing any better either. Or you look at the Xbox Windows Store, it's not doing any better either. So it would take a ton of money and a lot of time to catch up just to the point where Steam is right now. The only thing I think that could probably hurt Valve is if there was some kind of antitrust decision that split Valve, the hardware manufacturer, away from Valve, the game company, away from Valve, the runner of Steam as a marketplace. Even if game development and hardware development were combined as one company, that would be a big blow to their united three main focuses. But if there was some kind of antitrust that did that, it would have to also inherently do the exact same thing for Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, because all of those companies have hardware manufacturing and a storefront and develop games. So it would only be fair if some kind of antitrust split all those companies up. I don't know if that would be much better, because you'd probably just see the game development parts of all those companies struggle and then probably be shut down. It would probably just hurt the game industry overall. The Steam Fighting Games Fest starts July 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific time, apparently. And I feel like some of these games are fairly old and questionable whether you would really call these fighting games. And Brawlhalla, I imagine, is a Smash Brothers clone. Interesting nobody talks about it, but it seems like it's fairly well received. And even like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero here is going to be a very different game than, say, Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Yeah, fighting is a very wide category. Streets of Rage being a 2D or 2.5D beat 'em up now. Gang Beasts, I guess technically you're fighting people, but I wouldn't really call that a fighting game. And then there's going to be some point shop items that you can claim for free. Can we claim them now? Yes, you can. Alright. They are still promoting the point shop. Now, I don't think they really have to do too much there. So this is like an avatar frame. I think the general thought is, as long as they just keep pushing people to the point shop, they can slowly push people away from the marketplace and keep prying eyes away from all the Counter-Strike 2 skins that are being traded and sold on the marketplace. Yeah, I could see the marketplace getting shut down eventually, but they'd have to do it very, very slowly. Yeah, and if anything, I guess Valve should be applauded that the Steam Deck is an effort for Valve to actually make more money on game sales in the long run, whereas the knife skins of Counter-Strike 2 marketplace has been their main source of revenue in the past. Yeah. So they're, I guess, doing a little bit better. Killer Instinct free to play and still nobody's playing it. Yeah. I'm still nowhere close personally to ever actually playing a fighting game. It's just going to be too much of a commitment, and inherently it's just not my style of game, so I would rather do 10,000 plus puzzles on the Islands of Insight than to do. This one looks interesting. Than to do a fighting game and have to start over from scratch and learn new things. I'm just not really into it. Warrior Beneath Heaven. Looks like nothing. So these free demos showing some different types of games. And inherently, I imagine Street Fighter and Dragon Ball games just eat up the vast majority of the fighting game genres, the mini fighting game genres. This Hunter vs. Hunter game might be received better. It's gonna inherently depend on what the fandom in the West really is. And this Shattered Soul game is really a Metroidvania game. So yeah, Shattered Soul looks like it might be interesting. Mare Fight looks not polished visually quite enough, although the idea of mermaid fighters is an interesting twist. It's not something you're going to see. And then the Black Heart here is weirdly well received. It barely has relevancy from 2021, but it does have enough. Certainly I would have to do a very, very deep dive around fighting games to justify playing such a weirdly themed fighting game on top of a fairly pixely 2D fighting game, which almost all fighting games now are much better animated. My macros are still slightly broken, but it does seem like with every update, there was a new update to UI Vision, it's getting a little bit better. So there is some progress that seems to be happening there. I still don't know what the deal is there. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com here says the major Fallout 4 mod, I assume this is Fallout London, can't be played on the Epic Game Store versions of the game. No support for version rollbacks means Fallout London mod won't come to the Epic storefront for the foreseeable future. I also heard that Fallout London had some interesting voice acting in it. Now, Bethesda has said that they never really wanted to tell a story outside of what would be the United States. Now, in the Fallout universe, the United States might also include Mexico and Canada, but I don't think it goes as far as South America or anywhere in Europe like London or England, if England wants to pretend like it's not part of Europe. Although they could definitely retcon that at any point. They could certainly also just set a far in the future date in which the United States is reformed to some level of power, whether that's the Enclave or the Brotherhood of Steel or something, and it gets so strong in a distant future that it is just back to normal warfare and they just invade and take over countries. But yeah, on the thought of Fallout London, not knowing anything about it, you might have some interesting locations in London, like the Eye of the World, and I assume this is Big Ben, and Parliament Building, and canals and things like that, but I don't know what else you really do with it. You probably are going to end up just doing a bunch of silly jokes about the British, making fun of the British from an American point of view. But yeah, I don't know what else you really are going to find. Silliness probably is the right move, though. I've said that about Fallout before, is that the story should be fairly silly. But yeah, I can't help but think that it would just be a one-note gag where you would run into Mr. Handies, but the Mr. Handies would have British accents. You would run into Sentry Robots, but they would have British accents. All of the non-playable characters would have British accents. Yeah, I imagine there isn't much more of that. You could perhaps play up a second angle in that in London maybe there aren't so many guns, so maybe it is very much a knife and boards with nails in it style of game. You could do that, but then you eliminate the run and gun shooting. That honestly, I think there should be more of that in Fallout. I think most gamers, there's still a large number of gamers that are used to playing just run and gun looter shooters, and when they get introduced to the VAT system and base building and stats and just the older school style of role-playing games, they get overwhelmed. This headline also certainly highlights what I was just talking about, in that Epic Games Store is not really competing with Steam. According to the ESRB ratings, Link will be playable in The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I could imagine what is the case there is that you will either unlock him as a character model after you've beaten the game once, which would be the right way to do that, or there will just be some sections where you play as Link, or there will be some kind of co-op where you play as Link as the second player. The worst case scenario is that it pops up right at the beginning, a choose your character, and then Nintendo inherently just sees feedback that 90% of all kid players chose to play as Link instead of Zelda, and thus they use that as an excuse just to never make another game where you can control Zelda, which this actually is technically the second game or third game that you can play as Zelda, because the Zelda CDI games let you play as Zelda. At least one of them did. But yeah, it kind of ruins the whole idea of the Echoes of Wisdom concept though, if you're playing as Link, because then you're going to be playing as Link that doesn't have any of his equipment. So yeah, I don't think that's really going to make it feel much better. And I can't blame little kids that they would want to play as Link instead of Zelda. Like, it's inherently after Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the new generation of fans of Zelda games like Link, and so they want to play as him, obviously. There's been more coverage of Nintendo's systematic policy of miscrediting, harming external translators. GameDeveloper.com has put out, I think, a better article here. I think they intentionally have this as a blurry image. But yeah, external translators are often locked into decade-long non-disclosure agreements, and major franchises such as The Legend of Zelda and Animal Crossing have refused to credit translators. Yep. So definitely on the back end of Nintendo, with the new president of Nintendo of Japan in charge, it does not seem like doesn't seem like much has changed. Some of this also comes down to Nintendo hires companies, and those middleman companies have policies to refuse to credit people. And inherently, this is a great example of where non-disclosure agreements, in most cases, are illegal in the United States and non-enforceable, but the threat of going through a lawsuit is still real. So there should be even more protection against individuals and extreme limitations against being able to form a non-disclosure agreement, probably to the point where very few people should be able to agree to that. Mostly just government agencies, employees of the government like the CIA, FBI, and in those cases you would just be hung for treason, or arrested for treason, not hung, if you disclosed top secrets, so you don't need non-disclosure agreements even in that case. But also, in general, it should just be made known that if you're speaking the truth, you cannot be sued, and they cannot win if somebody sues you for speaking the truth, non-disclosure agreement or not. And it is definitely, if you worked on a project, you should be able to speak the truth and say, I worked on that project. Wonder if there might be some legalese around this where you could put on your portfolio or resume that I worked on a game possibly very similar to the Legend of Zelda. These aren't like old games, these are the newer Legend of Zelda and Animal Crossing games. I'm sure they're still doing it. Yep. Unfortunately, this is just another evil habit that Nintendo has had the whole time, and yep, once you start getting close to looking at it on a deeper level, you see how abusive Nintendo has been, and that has led to their long-term success. Probably not. They just got lucky to be successful, and then they just were able to be abusive because they got lucky and were successful. I don't think their abusive policies, whether it's copyright claims or miscrediting people or whatever, I don't think that's really helped Nintendo be successful at all. And inherently, if you really start looking into the history of Nintendo, they start, like, Donkey Kong is a ripoff of King Kong. Now, should King Kong in general have been copyrighted? Probably not, but it was. And there was a whole lawsuit that Nintendo lucked out on winning. Otherwise, Donkey Kong arcade machines would have been declared copyright material of the King Kong creators, and they probably would have demanded all the Donkey Kong arcade machines be destroyed, and that would have been the end of Nintendo at that point. As far as video games go, they possibly would have had enough money to keep on going. Yep. And certainly when you see these bad habits of Nintendo, it's no wonder that it feeds into whispered tinfoil hat theories that the Yakuza is still heavily invested in Nintendo, because they certainly have Yakuza like mob like mentality very often. Speaking of what might be considered mob-like mentality, the International Game Developers Association has come out swinging against the Patent Office in a Supreme Court case. I assume this is all in the United States. This is a Patent Office new requirement for trademark registration. They're saying it could open developers up for potential harassment. Just reading this sub-headline, I assume this means that when you file a trademark, you have to actually put like contact information and your name on the forms, and game developers don't want to do that because they want to hide so that they don't get criticism or harassed, either one. Let's read for some details so I'm not just shooting my mouth off. A YouTuber are also challenging it. The new rule calls for applications to provide their home addresses. Odin Law and Media, a firm representing Kang and IGDA, argued that this rule unnecessarily exposes applicants, particularly those in the game industry. I don't know why that's particularly in the game industry. It does kind of seem like that is a fairly extreme requirement, though, if I will side with the people I was just not really siding with before 5 seconds ago. Home address seems pretty extreme. Why not home or office address? Why not P.O. box? Now, I also heard about both Europe and the United States are pushing for new regulations on smart devices. Europe forcing it on companies within their domain, and the United States making it optional, to the point where there will be QR codes on smart devices that you can scan. If this all goes through in the United States, that would tell you whether a device has been hacked or breached, or whether it still is considered secure. And there are some other rules and regulations there, which would be very hard making a smart device if you're just one little inventor, which I had a project that I backburnered to make a smart device, and inherently if I had to go through extra rules and regulations and extra liability to make some kind of prototype device, and if there was no limitation on how big your business had to be, that could kill me. Now the European ones, since I'm in the United States, wouldn't really affect me. It would only affect people importing my smart device if I got it and started selling it, which, yeah, the fines in the European one are starting, I think I heard, at $4 million if there's a security breach. So on a end user side, this does look like both the European Union and the United States are starting to take security breaches a lot more seriously after decades of smart devices being allowed to become parts of botnets to do denial of service attacks. But yeah, it seems like those are the kind of laws that probably will get watered down, and probably need to be watered down to be more realistic. There's a big difference between finding Microsoft because they put a backdoor in Windows versus finding somebody who made a single, like, smart outlet switch that would turn on a lamp or not. There's a lot of room there for stupidity. That has nothing to do with this story, though. Although, inherently, I can still see myself siding somewhat with the patent office as far as trademark registration goes. It's a dumb rule to have to list your home address, but also trademarks in general are dumb. And if this was a way to eliminate a significant number of trademark applications, so be it. Like, almost nothing I think deserves to be trademarked at this point. I'm not sure it ever did, because trademark is when Levi's sews a piece of letter onto a pair of jeans and it says Levi's in a certain font. That's your trademark. That's the only thing protected on the jeans. Everything else on the jeans, as far as the cut, the fit, the design, the color, the pattern, the fabric, all of that is so generic, even combined in a unique way, that it cannot be copyrighted in any way. So people are free to make a pair of Levi jeans that looks exactly like a Levi jeans. They are not free to sew in the name badge of Levi's onto it, because Levi's are trademarked. And yeah, even when that was first introduced, that feels like that is just a kind of weird compromise. I still, as a YouTube content creator, though, feel like the copyright system could use a lot more work, and it would benefit society a lot more than making tweaks to the trademark system. Very rarely do we get stories of Nintendo suing people for a trademark infringement, which would be using the Nintendo logo or something like that. Let's see. YouTube gaming proving itself to once again be behind the times, in that yesterday they put out a Astrobot appreciation post, which, man, if they had done that a couple weeks ago, even a couple days after the Astrobot game was announced, that would be appropriate. It makes sense. But to do it now makes very little sense. otherwise YouTube gaming's still very pointless. Twitter channel, Twitter feed. Speaking of which, the YouTube updates for content creators, I'm seeing a lot of different people being in front of the camera when they make announcements. So it definitely feels like they're making it more of a round table, or they're at least getting rid of the main guy being the main guy, which it doesn't really matter who makes the announcements for the small tweaks they add to YouTube. YouTube Studio in particular, and where you upload and schedule videos. It does look like they tweaked the color fonts and the way the page looks a little bit recently also. So Nintendo had teased this horror game, The Smiling Man, and now they have given more information that this is called Amio the Smiling Man, part of the Famicom Detective Club, which would be the first new entry in the Famicom Detective Club series in 35 years, which inherently I have to assume that either this is the new Japanese president greenlighting a weirder project because he had some fandom for it. I assume the Famicom Detective Club games never actually came to the West originally either. The other thought here is this might just be a copyright renewal thing. You know, keep that copyright, keep that trademark. Yeah, if we zoom in here, there is a tiny little trademark. I think that's the symbol there, because copyright tends not to be in the superset in the top part. So, and yeah, trademarks in particular in the United States are use it or lose it. So I'd have to assume that this is probably not going to be much of a game, and it is just for trademark reasons. Although this might be a very, very slow reaction to the amount of success that they've seen as far as visual novels on the Switch. This, I would hope, is not an indication as to what they're planning on doing with the next console, that you're just going to see a massive amount of visual novels on the next Switch. I mean, there can be a massive amount of them, but if that is the main focus and you see no like Mario games, that would be crazy. I'm not 100% sure what this story is all about, but Video Games Chronicle says a petition to stop cultural appropriation in Genshin Impact has reached 665,000 signatures, which sounds like a lot, although who knows how secure from bots a lot of these petitions are and who the people are that are really signing this. There's been several times where I've seen the Japanese were upset about one thing about a game, and then it just doesn't get mentioned or talked about in the rest of the world, or the people in the United States are upset about one aspect in the game and it's not mentioned in the rest of the world. Sometimes there's a unified front, but it's less likely. Apparently Genshin Impact voice actors have spoken out in frustration to a lack of representation in the game, which I don't know what they're really looking for here, other than perhaps people of darker complexion, because I would look at this and see that the Japanese might think of this girl as being Japanese, where Westerners would think of this girl as being white, and then this character is a bunny-eared character, so you're representing a non-existent species in that case. Let's see. 3 new characters debuted in a recent trailer from Natlan and North Region coming to Genshin Impact. The reveal faced large backlash after fans pointed out that the region, which was inspired by Africa, was largely feature will largely feature an ensemble of white characters. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, in that either the Asians who are making Genshin Impact depict black people, and then they won't know how to do it in a way that makes people happy, and then they get accused of racism, which is what they're terrified of and which they don't want to do, or they avoid that completely and then they get accused of racism for erasure, cultural erasure, effectively. So yeah, and unfortunately very often that is the case for the Asian creators of games, is that they just don't have a day-to-day or even in their lifetime experience of dealing with anybody from Africa, and so the only things they know are just going to be stereotypes or things that are just not nuanced and appropriate. Inherently, the best thing they've figured out to do is to say Asians should make games with Asian people, and they would call most of these people Asian in their minds and the way they animate things and think about animation, and then Africans should make African games with African people, which kind of is a decent argument. Certainly it's not going to happen. There's not enough funding and infrastructure and lack of corruption in any African country to make a lot of video games. But yeah, and being inspired by a forest, or which is what this looks like in this screenshot, seems to be kind of a stretch to say it's inspired by Africa. Or even being inspired directly from Africa doesn't mean anything. Like, I can't really blame Asians for trying not to be racist, because the last thing you would want would be completely ivy black skin and big old red lips and just blackface effectively on the characters. And that's one of the things that's interesting about Islands of Insight, is that they've really just slammed in a very generic MMO character creator into Islands of Insight, which allows you to create way more creatures with like purple skin or neon green skin than focusing on characters that would look like a natural human skin tone. It's way fewer options to make a white character or a black character in Islands of Insight, and even if you do, they're still going to have clothing and magic wings and things like that that highlights them definitely to not be human. But it also makes it very hard to relate to your character that way, and it's not particularly a good modern character creator in the first place. Mostly you just scroll the mouse wheel up and you're in first person mode the whole time anyways, except for when you're flying and when you're gliding. So I'll have to keep an eye out to see how this all goes. This definitely feels like feels like the voice actors may have started this whole controversy, because I assume the voice actors are just being SJW-y and thinking that they're doing something. Inherently, if the Asian creators of Genshin Impact made animated characters that were black, you're still not really hiring any black animators or black voice actors, so you're not actually helping anybody who's black at that point. You are at best removing what could be perceived as a microaggression against black players, and that's it. Whereas, contrast that to something like Velma, which I've been watching some YouTubers talk about how awful that is. At the very least, you can say about Velma is that they actively went out of their way to reset and reanimate the Scooby-Doo gang to match the voice actors. So the main protagonist playing Velma is now Indian because the voice actor is Indian. Does that make any sense for Velma? No. Is Velma a show worth even spending a second to watch? No. It's total garbage from what I hear. But at least they did what they said they were going to do there. Although it seems like they probably did it backwards in that they cast the Indian voice actress to play Velma. Then they changed Velma to being an Indian. They also changed Daphne to be Asian because the voice actor for Daphne is Asian. And then they, I assume, changed Shaggy to be black because the voice actor for Shaggy is black in Velma. Of course, that just those 3 statements and 3 changes alone tells you how little Velma is connected to the Scooby-Doo universe. They should have just made a new group of characters. On the other hand, if you wanted to make the argument that cartoons like Scooby-Doo from the 1960s were full of just white people, yeah, sure. But I also remember when Scooby-Doo met the Harlem Globetrotters, and they went out of their way to highlight them. I'm kind of ranting here, and I really don't have extra time for it, so let's move on. The Video FX studio Axis has shut down after 24 years. Axis was famous for making the fairly deceptive trailer for Dead Island 1 made by Techland. Inherently, they tried to redo that deception with Dying Light. No, not with Dying Light. They tried to redo that type of trailer with Dead Island 2. I guess it's technically Dead Island 2. Maybe Dead Island 3. I'm not sure which number they're up to. There could be a really bad Dead Island 2 that I'm forgetting. But yeah, this trailer looked very interesting in that it was cinematically playing backwards. Wonder if they just have it. So you'd see time rewind with a character falling out the window, and then it rewinds and you start to see where the zombie apocalypse happened. And while you can see this room in Dead Island 1, you don't play as any of the characters in the trailer, nor is the experience you really see in the trailer connected to what the experience or even the attitude was for Dead Island. Dead Island was much more of a run and gun looter shooter game where the trailer gave it the feeling like it was going to be a hyper realistic dramatic zombie game. And I would also say, if your most notable creation after 24 years was making the trailer for Dead Island 1, you certainly have not kept up. And like, there should be some trailer that would have gotten more attention. You're talking 13 years ago when that came about. Animation studios in general have been failing for the longest amount of time, and most animation has this opportunity to naturally just move internally into game companies, because you can just make in-engine animation instead of pre-rendered animation. And inherently there's major pushback to deceptive trailers. There's major pushback to cinematic trailers when games are getting revealed. E3 is gone, so you don't need, or you don't really even have a great place to highlight cinematic trailers. So the game industry has just evolved, and these kinds of advertisements just don't make any sense anymore. They barely made sense before. Let's see, we'll just go ahead and close all the unimportant tabs here. And see, that's still the weirdness there, in that all of my other tabs either didn't open, which is a possibility, or they opened in this new window. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and go through the news, since I guess I'm here. See if that works. Although, yeah. So the next Ryu ga Gotoku game will be revealed at Tokyo Game Show 2024, which that is a feather in the hat for Tokyo Game Show, because I'm always getting the feeling that Tokyo Game Show doesn't really ever have any major new announcements, or new announcements in general. But with Sony not being at Gamescom, and there still not being a clear winner in the United States as far as what event you would present new games at. You could do it at an Xbox Direct, a PlayStation Direct, and Nintendo Direct, or you could do it at the Summer Games Fest. Summer Games Fest, perhaps the more logical pick if you want to be platform agnostic. We already talked about this petition as much as I can. I'm admittedly woefully ignorant on this one. Maybe I've done a better job not paying attention to those kinds of things, because I have been instead wasting time and money during the Amazon Prime Day sales. It was way easier this year to figure out what I was going to buy, though. A lot of things in my cart a little on sale, but the majority of things not on sale at all, and not a lot of things that were close to what the things that I needed to buy were. Amazon is offering everything needed to play Xbox without a console for $69, which I guess inherently means you're getting a controller and a Fire TV stick. Yeah. But in reality, you'd also need a Wi-Fi router and probably Xbox Game Pass. So, you know, it's a wireless controller, Fire TV stick, 4K Max, and 1 month of Game Pass Ultimate for $70. Not a terrible option. Then there is also, I guess, an assumption here that the wireless controller is probably connecting to the Fire Stick via Bluetooth. I don't think we've got a point where Xbox controllers can work like the Stadia and just directly connect to Wi-Fi. See, and inherently the European new regulations, if they get set as far as smart devices, include any device that connects to your home Wi-Fi. So you would have to have some kind of rule for the Fire Stick, and possibly a rule for a Stadia-like controller if the controller directly connected to the Wi-Fi. Microsoft has released a new Xbox 360 Blade dynamic background for the Series X and S, for the people who can't stop talking about the Blades concept. One thing I think you take from the Blades concept is how interfaces are hard, and I don't think anybody has really figured out the right visual metaphor for what you want to do. The best I can ever figure is you need to go vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, to just try and maximize the amount of space. And the Netflix style of depicting things, and that you have carousels, seems to be about the standard nowadays. It's not really what the interface I think is for the Xbox Series X and S, but that would be generally what I think you do. And you look at Steam, and Steam is very much carousels for the most part, but then it spices things up every now and then. Apparently Saber, and I assume this is Focus Home Interactive, are saddened by a leak of old Space Marine 2 builds. Companies thank fans for the support and asked them to avoid unfinished builds of the game. I also heard somebody claiming that there's probably a virus in them, which is a generic claim you could make without any evidence pretty easily. This does seem to be the decent response when a game leaks, is just to say we're sad about that, not really go on the attack, but try to shame and instill some feel of disappointment onto people who would go and download leaked builds. It comes off considerably less Streisand-y than threatening to sue people, although companies still probably will sue individuals that leak games or torrent and share builds of games. They'll go after the original leakers, I imagine. The spin-off Dead by Daylight game, the casting of Frank Stone, has received a release date. It is 2 versus 8 mode, which I would have thought it would have been a single player experience to spin off the 4 versus 1 mode of Dead by Daylight, but they're going in the exact opposite direction. So theoretically, if they were to make another spin-off, it would be 3 versus 12, and they just push the numbers higher and higher. UK video game sales dropped nearly 30% in the first half of 2024, but game sales were still greater than music and video sales combined. Yep. Decent amount of Blu-rays and UHD things on sale during the Amazon Prime Day sale. Unfortunately, things that are on sale tend not to be movies that you really would need to own. Like, you can get like the Babylon 5 Blu-ray box set for a decent price, but it's still like $60. You could get all of Supernatural, all 15 seasons of that. If you wanted to watch all of Supernatural in a row, you could probably still stream that pretty easily, whereas Babylon 5 it would be harder to find. I'm not sure any of these Blu-rays really have any extras at all. There were a few anime Blu-rays that really are Blu-rays that probably came out over the course of the last decade and a half, and there's just not really been a lot of new stuff. Meanwhile, there is definitely a feeling that 4K UHD is dying, and that there's very likely not going to be a new physical media standard to replace it anytime soon. I didn't see any 4K monitors really on sale. I didn't see any 4K UHD players on sale, so that kind of hardware I think is still going to stay at a high price, even if the actual movies get fewer and fewer. Yep. And I said this in the last stream, and I'll say it again. Unless you're getting mostly niche entertainment like anime or a movie like Eraserhead, most movies are available to stream pretty easily, and most movies are not good enough that you want to watch them multiple times through. So that has just led to the death of quality viewing experiences in favor of just streaming video at lower quality. But yeah, it's no surprise that music has stagnated it's been stagnant for 2 or 3 decades at this point, and video is starting to stagnate as video games get bigger. Even at that though, it's also no surprise that the first half of 2024 saw a major drop in sales when there was just absolutely no new games getting released other than Stellar Blade, a niche game in itself. Let's see, new Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud have been confirmed. Kunitsu Gami, Path of the Goddess, Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, and Dungeons of Hindenburg. I think I have seen Kunitsugami, but I don't really remember what it is. Resident Evil 7 on iOS has reportedly been purchased by fewer than 2,000 people. Previous iOS console ports have seemingly also performed poorly. This is an interesting rumor that we'll probably never know the true numbers to. But it also makes a lot of sense. Just look at the screenshot. This is a nightmare concept to try and play Resident Evil 7 with so many on-screen buttons that you would have to probably memorize, because I assume when you're actually playing, none of these buttons are actually being shown. Right triggers, left bumps, right clicks, left analog stick, D-pad, yeah, and possibly just touchscreen, back, and menu. Ignoring the inputs, look at the game itself. Like a game like Resident Evil 7, known for being very pretty, looks very blurry and ugly in this screenshot. If Apple wanted to actually enter the gaming market, which they could, they would probably do well to lean on what they already know and release something that feels like a Switch, that feels like a Steam Deck, and has the Apple M2 or M3 chipsets in it, and is targeted exclusively for games. But then Apple would have to play ball and do right by game companies, and I just don't imagine that they're actually going to do that. Yeah. It would be a nice scheme, certainly, though, for Apple, and in their normal operating procedure, to introduce yet another Apple product to sell to Apple fanboys after selling iPhones and iPads and MacBooks and iWatches. Yeah. More likely, I would put my bets that Apple is going to come out with a smart ring or a smart necklace of some set. They're not, I think, going to succeed with their augmented reality glasses that they were working on. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Gamescom 2024 will feature more exhibitors than ever, it's been claimed. Show kicks off on August 20th. Rockstar's GTA subscription service could be coming to the Nintendo Switch, which, you know, that would allow Rockstar to get even more money while doing the bare minimum. Alternative early names for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire have reportedly been discovered. What were they? I imagine they would have just been some kind of color. Indigo version, Crimson version. Well, Indigo and Crimson feel like something that they eventually did name Pokemon games after. That's really not much information, nor is it very helpful to know that. It's a nice trivia bit of information, and that's it. A pre-release build of Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is leaked. We're working backwards through the news. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 multiplayer beta dates have been confirmed. Link will be playable in The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom according to the ESRB rating. And EA Sports FC 24 Ultimate Edition cover has been released, with a full reveal coming sometime this week. Maybe that's already happened. Mortal Kombat 1's DLC character Takeda stars in a new gameplay trailer. We looked at that last stream also. So that brings me to the Gematsu headlines now. EA Sports Football Club 25 launches September 27th. I'll leave it at that. And then automatically, when running UI Vision, it will scroll down the page to where it's clicking. So by having it automatically click this Steam link that goes to Steam, the page will start here instead of starting at the top. I can fix that though. I will simply have it click on something at the very top. Although in old HTML you would do that by laying down an anchor. I don't know how you do that in HTML5. A lot has changed since my days of doing HTML2 or 3. Maybe I was doing HTML1 for all I know. Anyways, the Plucky Squire Rocket Ride gameplay is available. You can see the Plucky Squire is already on my follow list, so I assume I've already made a YouTube short on it. And then we have Hollow Cocoon here also being shown, and so I would assume that the macro is still a little broken, and so the next tab will be talking about Hollow Cocoon. Yes, Hollow Cocoon is coming to the Switch on July 25th, which means it has been out for a while, but it is justifiable to make a new YouTube short on it if I didn't the first time. Although, in fairness, this probably is going to be one that would not work anyways, because it's probably rated more mature and has an age gate in front of it. Yeah, you want those games, right? So here you go. Now let's see. Clear Them 2 has been announced for the PS4 and 5 and Switch, not for Steam. This was a collection of the fake mini games you see advertisements for cell phone games, except for they actually made those games, which isn't the worst idea ever, to actually deliver on what you're promising. Just crow things. So I still need these tabs seem to be getting in the wrong order, and I need to see the headlines here first to know what's going on with them. So this is a launch date of August 15th for Just Crow Things for all of these consoles, coming later for the PS4 and 5. You never see the story talk about anything other than later for the PS4 and 5. Nothing else really gets delayed, with perhaps the rare exception that Switch versions just don't get announced, and then they get announced much later. Nocturnal 2 being announced for Switch and PC, coming out in 2025. We can see that this one is not on the follow list, so this would be an indication that's the first time I've heard about it. Let's scroll down very far. Let's see. No Man's Sky Worlds Part 1 update is now available, unless that's supposed to be Worlds Part I. Transforms the universe into a richer, wilder, more varied and immersive place. This would be version 5.0 of No Man's Sky. Well, No Man's Sky these days is getting received fairly well, and so maybe they get to a version 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, and then they have at maybe that point created enough of a foundation that a No Man's Sky 2 might be something that they could sell the audience on, or major DLC, so that they could gain more money. They've worked very hard to do right by No Man's Sky, and I guess they deserve a little bit of credit, but in fairness, nobody gets a second bite at the apple. Whatever the state of your game is when it launches, whether it's early access or not otherwise, is the state at which games really have to be judged by, and for the most part. Because there is also that danger that maybe No Man's Sky 1 becomes a very polished game, but then they release a No Man's Sky 2 that is just as bad as the launch version of No Man's Sky 1 was. Where I talked about Emio, the smiling man, being announced for the Switch. Orcs Must Die Death Trap has been announced for the Xbox Series and PC. So, weirdly, that tab is to the left where all the other tabs are to the right. It does seem like it just kind of goes around. The Orcs Must Die series has lasted fairly long, considering there's not been a huge amount of success around it. I guess the name is probably a good name to have. Catches people's attention. Into the Infinite, a level Infinite showcase for 2024 has been set for July 19th. So this is going to be effectively a direct from level Infinite. Let's see. Opus Prism Peak has a gameplay trailer and new key visuals and screenshots. I knew I'd recognized this game before, the name of the game. This is, I think, the photography game with maybe some time travel elements to it. It is dangerous, certainly as a story here, and that I suspect it's an old man remembering things and remembering this girl when she was closer to his age. Otherwise, you have very much a age gap of a story. That big age gap there. And in these modern times, you can't really tell those kinds of stories. The artist not being really allowed to tell those kinds of stories without major controversy. Now here's an interesting thing. How did I get to this point when running my macro? Was there a link that said Steam that accidentally took me to the shooter category on Komatsu? That's the only thing I can assume is what happened. The roguelite first-person shooter action game Unyielder is going to be published by Shueisha Games. Let's see. So that would go to a Steam page. And clicking on that did work and take me to a Steam page that seems like it didn't exist before. Whereas to get to the shooter category, you would have had to go all the way down here. So yeah, I don't know what happened there. And then Inazuma 11 Victory Road is finally on Steam. Anime inspired soccer game of some sort. The headline here is saying that the worldwide beta test demo for the PS4 and 5 and PC launches July 18th. Then here we have a Switch category. But there's no back button on these tabs, so if they were being opened in the same window as something important, there would be a back button option to go back. So my macro is working, I would say 98% of the time correctly, and then acting funny 2% of the time. Cho Aniki Collection has been announced for the Switch. Yeah. Again, I don't know why this one would have been clicked. And I could go to the GameDeveloper.com headlines, but I think what I want to do is come over to the other side and work on new games that came out on Steam, and then we'll finish with GameDeveloper.com. So these are Video Games Chronicle headlines. I think we've probably covered all of these. Call of Duty Season 5 trailer revealing a WWE operator and cel-shaded map. The cel-shaded map might be an interesting experiment, although it also feels like it is theme breaking. Whereas an operator based on a WWE wrestler seems weird. Although if this is the operator they're talking about, I guess it's not that crazy if you took a wrestler and face scanned them and put them in appropriate costumes. Ray Ripley. If this is Ray Ripley, that doesn't look terrible. This is way more thematically breaking. EA Sports Club FC 25 release date and 1 week early access period has been confirmed. EA Sports Club FC 25 adds a 5 vs 5 rush mode as Volta is removed. Volta sounds like a mode, but it might be a person. Rush mode will replace Volta, a small-sided mode that has been in the last few EA football games. There's 3 different headlines here from game developer about videogameschronicle.com. EA Sports Club FC 25 Ultimate Team adding duplicate storage and more evolutions. What duplicate storage means, you can store up to 100 duplicate player items in the Ultimate Team for later use in squad building challenges. Oh, I thought it was going to be a case where you would back up your save files to the cloud and locally, which honestly, even that being a sales pitch sounds crazy, because almost certainly you should automatically be backing up save files to the cloud and locally, and anytime a game supports cloud save files. Amazon Prime is currently giving away Suicide Squad, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Chivalry 2. I don't think any of these are going to be accessible through Steam. No, they're all through the Epic Games Store, which I guess grab them if you want. And then PlayStation Store's summer sale launched with over 4,500 deals. Which, okay. I guess that would have been the place to go if you were looking for video games. Then, and we already talked about the T's here. And then the Famitsu review scores from Gamatsu are way over here on the left, and I don't know why they're way over here on the left. Let's see. Omega 6 the Triangle Stars for the Switch got 31 out of 40. Quiz Sekai wa Ichinego presents Atsushi no Matantai for the Switch got a 29 out of 40. That was a mouthful. And then Some Convenience Store for the Switch got 27 out of 40. There's nothing here launching for anything other than Switch this week. Very slow week. Okay. Now, unfortunately, even though I haven't been distracted again or interrupted, I'm going to have to interrupt myself for what will be my second break of this stream. So I'll be back in about 10 or 20 minutes. Okay, I'm back. So now we'll go through all the new games on Steam. I talked about in the last stream that, I guess I'll give this a chance. OBS's newest version introduces hybrid MP4. I'm not 100% sure that they aren't just making a standard themselves. Is this English? Full audio in French, but does support English subtitles, it claims. Alright. I figured it might not be English just based on the animation style here. With the introduction of this hybrid MP4 by OBS, on top of its main thing of just allowing for video files to not be corrupted if your hard drive fills up or if your computer restarts in the middle of recording, is that it adds chapters for applications like DaVinci Resolve. It seems to me, although I didn't go any further in my investigation to actually see if it would work, that chapters would also be accessible via FFmpeg, which means I could make a command line script that would automatically chop up chapters in a video into clips and make duplicate things with the appropriate file names based on the chapter name for each clip, which would save a lot of time on scheduling and uploading those videos. Now, inherently, I still would have to use Advanced Scene Switcher with my already existing code and macros that Advanced Scene Switcher is using to label the chapters to begin with, which that's fine. So there is this potential future where clips will be better than what they are now, and that clips will effectively be shorts on YouTube instead of being actual clips, which my current system of trying to make clips I don't think actually works, and I'm gonna have to say no to this one. I seriously doubt it is actually getting me any views by making clips using the clip system, because it seems to me like YouTube's clip system is exclusively for you to make a clip and then share the clip and promote it yourself, and it doesn't integrate any clips you create as into the suggestion feed or the YouTube algorithm. Some kind of musical game. Again, does this support English? Says it does. Yeah. So far, we're seeing somewhat interesting games. Or perhaps I'm just being a little generous. Different art styles, certainly here. I don't know if I can inherently say I think this is a good art style, but it's different. Atomic Games is flooding the market, it seems. We had like 3 Atomic Games in a row. Yeah. This is a tower defense, so I'm gonna say no to it. This very possibly is a very old game being re-released. Let's see if it says anything here. Nope, nothing indicating this. Inherently, if this was a very old game, which it very well might be, from the 80s or early 90s, it gets very hard to justify spending $4 for a game that they've just run through probably DOSBox as an emulator and put no effort into it at all. And there definitely were a lot of low effort games that were released in the early days of PC gaming. We are effectively miles ahead now. Even if you were just trying, this also I think is an old game. It's all getting published by Pico Interactive, which are, I think, fairly well known for releasing old games. But yeah, even if you wanted to have all your old PC games in your Steam library, it's just not going to be a good library. The library system in Steam is decent enough but you start to add an extra 5,000 games to it, very old games that probably need a little bit more polish, that's gonna not work. What also is not gonna work is making a fidget spinner game years after fidget spinners were a fad. Interesting. So you have a model kits mech builder game. That might work. Yeah. Magical delicacy looks interesting. Aerial knights. You never yield. My cord cargo, no. Demon Slayer, no. A lot of these, you can see this one is already being mixed received. A lot of these games are already on the fall list, which tells me I've already made a YouTube short on them and they're now just coming out. Yeah, it does seem like I opened myself up to have the opportunity to feel less pressure, to not take breaks by not playing any Yu-Gi-Oh! Myself. It is admittedly kind of pathetic, I have to say, to just use Yu-Gi-Oh! To highlight other people's broadcasts or other people's gameplay. But yeah, and I definitely should think of something better as a way of highlighting that I'm taking a break. But weirdly, it kind of works. To people who are still coming to my channel, if there are anybody left that are still coming to my channel to see Yu-Gi-Oh, we'd get to see a little bit. Meanwhile, the amount of time I'm actually spending personally playing Yu-Gi-Oh goes down. That being said, it can't go down completely, so I am creating this scenario where very often I should, and sometimes I think I actually will, play Yu-Gi-Oh off screen. Of course, that could change at any time. I definitely could just lose interest. Let's click old in-game. Clicker at least was something of a parody of the other Clicker games. Yep. And I guess in that comedic aspect, it is very well received. Zombie Treasure Island here looks like a cell phone game. We're not seeing as many of these nowadays. I think a big part of that is that people who are making those kinds of games don't really need to keep it in portrait mode anymore. They have figured out how to make their games work both in portrait mode and widescreen mode. Yeah. I would argue the fact that we're seeing curved screens be sold at all is highlighting that we're hitting a limit on the size and orientation of screens as far as viewing angles and such. And yeah, we almost certainly are. So many sci-fi stories promoted the idea that you would just plug your brain into computers, and we still really have not gotten anywhere close to that. Here we have one new clicker game. Here's another clicker game. Here's another clicker game. I think this is a clicker game, but it looks at least a little bit better than your average one. Perhaps I'm just a little bit more relaxed today, too. I'm not feeling particularly burned by the number of terrible games that have been released. Certainly it makes sense, though, if they have 75 employees at Valve, that why there might be exactly 0 people at Valve that are actually looking at these Steam Direct listings. That being said, that doesn't excuse them in any way. English not supported. I think this game is coming out to English at some point. I would have thought. Inherently, that there's always, in the past, ever since like things went digital, I guess, so the past few decades, there's been this increasing risk where you can sell digital goods and make massive amounts of profits without having any real costs on the backside of that, which has created a wealth in the disparity, in that somebody that can sell something physical cannot compete with somebody who can sell something virtually, particularly in games. That has been a big thing. Okay, so that brings us to GameDeveloper.com headlines, and then we'll be done for today, which weirdly, even with 2 breaks, I'm still going to be under 2 hours of real content. Phoenix Lab devs reveal how a now scrapped Project Dragon game. Major Fallout 4 mod can't be played on the Epic Games Store versions of the game. Ember's Murky Divers sells 100,000 early access copies in under a month. I don't even recognize this game, Murky Divers. IGDA comes out swinging against the Patent Office in a Supreme Court case. Echo Chunk raises $1.4 million to keep making AI-powered puzzle games. I'm hearing talk that investors feel like AI has already died, in that by this point in previous fads, somebody somewhere would have had a plan as far as how AI was going to make money and actually make a profit, and not just sell on the hype of AI, and that really just has not happened. Plus, there are constant rumors that the newest versions of AI are just getting worse, or at least not getting any better. So they've kind of plateaued, it seems. I guess this is another random click. The mobile multiplayer app Dusk launches with a Gen Z focus, raising $8 million in funding. A Discord specifically for younger phone players is what they're calling it, describing it as. GameDeveloper.com is describing it as. And then there's a report that Microsoft has shut down its diversity, equity, and inclusion team, and the X-Lead claims that similar programs are at risk. Well, this might be part of an overall restructuring at Microsoft. We saw a lot of layoffs happen at Xbox as a subsidiary of Microsoft, generally speaking, I think most people don't like the term DEI, and it's just become a boogeyman term. And inherently, if Microsoft wants DEI, that should have been part of human resources to begin with, and it should have been part of their hiring process to begin with. I'm not sure any of that has really happened or would happen. Arma 3 has sold over 500,000 copies during the Steam Summer Sale. It's a decade-old shooter that dropped to the lowest price during the sale, which I guess that highlights how you can get a decent amount of sales on an older game if you get the price down to a new low. Of course, you can only go so low before you're giving it away for free. Although, inherently, even if they gave it away for free, it wouldn't really hurt them any. Let's see. Saber Interactive asks player to avoid the leak of unfinished Space Marine 2 builds. This headline is a great example of, if I am going to make YouTube shorts tend to be a minute at most. What is that YouTube short going to look like as a clip? It's just going to be me possibly, and the emphasis here is on possibly, reading the headline of an article correctly. A lot of times it's going to be me stumbling over a headline or talking about something completely different. On a few occasions it will be me talking about something completely different. But you know, that might work too. That might just work. People searching Saber Interactive might see my clips as a recommendation if they were turned into shorts instead. If that definitely seems to be the case as far as the YouTube shorts I'm making right now, as far as new and trending games. There is an argument perhaps to make a clips channel if I'm going to do that, but can't really make a clips channel until I have monetization and some level of success on my main channel. It just is pointless to make a second channel until then. So that will be annoying to some people, almost certainly. Amazon's Fallout show and Walton Goggins score some Emmy nominations. Yeah, I'm not really hearing anybody talk about the Fallout show anymore. I think everybody has watched all of it, and most people binge watched it fairly quickly. They had their fun. I think there was probably a significant number of people, we'll probably never know the number, that did go to play Fallout 76 and Fallout 4, and even a smaller number of people like me who went to play Fallout New Vegas. I don't think the Fallout TV show is going to really connect to any of those games, and I think there's a decent chance that people who did go to play Fallout 4 or 76 or Vegas found it to feel very different and just not really relevant to the experience of watching the TV series, which watching a TV series is very different from playing a video game. Undoubtedly, I suspect we will see more video game based TV shows and movies, but I'm not sure it's ever going to be anything other than a funnel of taking video game fans and tricking them into watching TV shows and movies. It's less likely that it will take movie and TV viewers and funneling them to play video games that they wouldn't have played otherwise. The Belartro creator unveils a few slick signposting strategies, according to this article. This probably is an actual article, somewhat about developing a game. For as many articles as we do talk about from GameDeveloper.com, the significant number of them are not actually about game development, though. It's a poor name for it, really. Then Koei Tecmo and Yuzu have reached a settlement. Youzu have reached a settlement on copyright infringement. The two developers have decided on a mutually beneficial agreement out of court that will prevent further infringement on Youzu. I assume Youzu is it's a mobile studio. Which, if this is the story I'm thinking of, Koei Tecmo claimed that the mobile game developer just totally copyright infringed one of their games, or some of their games. Yeah, they were apparently using music and assets, Youzu was. So yeah, very rarely do you get straight up just copyright infringement and asset theft in games. Actually, I suspect it happens a lot more, particularly in the old days. I bet it happened quite a bit, but it was done in such a way that people would never get caught, and there was just a level of deniability about it. Whereas nowadays, there's just so many asset stores, and it's just so cheap to buy something that's been pre-made by someone else that there's just no reason to steal from somebody else. You could hire somebody to make something better. Yeah. Of course, the problem with the asset stores is I imagine most assets are either given away for free or sold at a significantly small price compared to what they should be sold at. Right. And so with that, I think we have done everything we need to do. Let's play one XYZ Cup game if we can. Let's see. I'm gonna play an XYZ deck. This is probably not the right one to start with. There's probably a deck here that is full of XYZ characters. Let's see how this one looks. Well, this one looks alright, I guess. All this would do would make me eliminate these cards. Now, inherently, I'm suspecting that the deck I just made is probably not very good. So there's a decent chance it'll just fail miserably. So while this is going on, let me bring up my Twitter feed and see if any new news has happened. Not really, there's been 15 posts. Oh, one of the things that the Amazon Prime sale was doing this time is there was a pretty decent, and there's still some hours on it, there's a pretty decent deal in that if you just click the slowest no rush shipping, they're promising 7% back if you use an Amazon Prime store card. Also, I think you have to use that. Which 7% back on purchases is not a bad offer. So yeah, think that was a pretty good move. I guess this is seemingly working fairly well. See how this goes. One of the other Blu-ray box sets was the Farscape Blu-ray box set, which actually watching all of Farscape is kind of hard, so that would be a good box set to grab. Certainly with Amazon Prime Video though, you're working against yourself in that element, in that you're buying physical media when you already have a service that is giving you streaming versions of a lot of videos. And I definitely have noticed with Prime Video, I am really just working myself backwards into watching shows I've watched at least once before, if not 2 or 3 times before. I'm living in a nostalgia for the heyday of the Sci-Fi Channel, because I was big into sci-fi. I don't know what other people would have been big into as far as TV. They probably weren't big into TV at all. In fact, there was only one show when I scrolled through all of the Blu-ray box sets that I didn't recognize at all. So there's just not enough TV and video out there to satisfy by modern standards, by my standards. My standards and my scale is much higher as far as how much entertainment I have time to consume of and how much entertainment I would like to see exist. But yeah. Let's see. We summon this and activate this. Let's try this again. This guy is just not playing any characters at all. Just playing spells. It may also be a case that of the videos being offered on sale, of the Blu-rays, of the UHDs, a lot of the videos are just Blu-rays still. And that's just the best version you're ever going to get. It might be that a lot of the better ones are just never go on sale. Amazon has that advantage, certainly, in that they could just have a shelf somewhere in a factory. It's just not going to cost them that much from a shipping facility to have a shelf full of Blu-rays versus Walmart that could be selling something else on their shelves and is paying rent and air conditioning to run a Walmart storefront. Yep. I keep trying and I keep losing here. This guy's just wrecking me on tricks. I've missed entire stories here. Once again. I just don't know how that happened. Here we can show 17 Emmy nominations for Outstanding Drama Series for Fallout. Although, do you even really have to do anything to get a nomination, or are you just putting out the nomination applications yourself? Okay. This isn't doing anything. It looks to me, this was another thing I noticed, that Borderlands now is pretty much being owned by 2K. They're demanding that you sign up for their email to get any of the gold shift keys, which definitely makes a different scenario versus following on Twitter and getting the shift keys. Okay, just see how this goes. So that should just cut my life in half again. But it'll take it a while. It'll take it like 5 more times before it got down to 2 to divide it down to 1. And I don't know if 1 divides it down to 0 or if 1 just divides it down to 1. So you can't win that way alone. You can win if you could just do 200 damage some other way, which he probably can. Even if he's just waiting for that card to show up. Try this. See what happens. Guess the question is, would this Yeah, I think I can win here. I don't know why he did it that way. It seems crazy. Oh, we're down to a 100-100. Yeah, the only news stories I guess I missed is that Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is now available on the PC. It's a turn-based RPG coming from a mobile version. Great example of how you can turn a mobile version into a PC game, and it won't be amazing, but it will work. It doesn't seem to me though. Like it's on Steam or at Epic Games Store. It seems like it is its own client. And then he beat me. So yeah, suffice it to say, that was a lot of time investment. And my goal would be to play off screen, I guess, to get to this point. If not that point. We have a few days to do that. Also, the goal would be to get to platinum before the end of the month. Just a whole bunch of new things. I guess you probably have to mark these as red. And server errors. They're actually admitting server errors. That seems new. As far as the missions go, there are some extra missions that would give you some extra small bits of gems, and there's daily missions and login missions and dual live missions, some of which I've done, but not really enough. And if I'm not going to play much these days, which it doesn't seem like I am, I'm going to eventually be unable to afford purchasing these decorative things. And then I'm eventually going to be unable to afford getting the gold dual pass, because I won't get the dual pass to 100. Where are we on solo? That's another aspect. Certainly the question. They may have made these a little bit bigger. There seems to be still just 3 new solos, although there might be more that are hidden behind finishing those first 3. The other story I missed: apparently PlayStation owners can claim a 3-month Apple TV Plus free trial. The offer is available until September. And then Sega is taking legal action against any individual, or against a specific individual who's accused of harassing an employee. This is probably being done in Japan, which we've noticed that in Japan this has been happening more and more. I think there will be eventually a pushback against Japanese companies suing Japanese citizens, even if they happen to be crazy. But you know, so far I think the Japanese people overall are siding more with the corporations at this point. It'll take some deep abuse of the process before the Japanese would fall afoul of it, since Japanese generally love to follow rules. Dark Horse Direct apparently brings you the finest high-end statues, collectibles, fine art, prints, and more. And I assume this is a subsidiary of Dark Horse Comics, but they have some Borderlands statue with the Firehawk and Tiny Tina in her Dungeons and Dragons outfit. That looks nice, frankly, as far as the design. And it's not a terrible statue, even if you don't know who Tiny Tina is. This 2 with Lilith, not a terrible design. So I would definitely say good work. Let's see if we can get slightly more details. It is slightly surprising that the hard edge art style that Borderlands is made out of works in a 3D statue. but it definitely seems like it does. And Dark Horse Director is doing a good job of showing enough pictures to get people's attention. Apparently there's a non-wings version too, which would make me suspect that you just have holes in her back if you take the wings off. What else have they released and made? 6-year anniversary apparently. Not a huge fan of figures generally, so it's not super surprising I've never heard of them before. This is taking forever to load in smoothly. Let's just scroll down here and see if anything else catches my attention. They also have posters. I suppose I have a slight concern that Borderlands may end up just being a thing that is used to sell movies and statues and stops really being a thing that is a video game. The big concern with 2K buying out Borderlands, well, not buying out Borderlands, they already owned Borderlands, but buying out Gearbox is that they might at some point just lay off everybody at Gearbox, at the multiple locations of Gearbox, Frisco, Texas, and then their newer Montreal and Quebec studios. But yeah, I could definitely see them handing over production to an internal team for the next Borderlands. And even that is not 100% guaranteed to be a bad thing in my mind. It would be bad for the employees at Gearbox, but it might be good for the series overall. So they made some Fallout TV series statues. I kind of feel like this statue probably was made before the TV show was fully aired, because she seems weirdly aggressive and violent, more than I would think she should be. Some of these statues are definitely also celebrating some fairly old games that have a lot of fandom, like this series. What is this? What's the name of this one? I've forgotten it. Mass Effect. When Mass Effect has been kind of a total failure. That's one thing you would hope to see with Microsoft acquiring so many companies, is that if a game was super popular and successful like Mass Effect, then there would be enough support studios and other studios potentially for Microsoft, if they did own Mass Effect, which they don't. But the idea would have been that they could have handed over development of Mass Effect Andromeda to another team to make sure it actually came out good. And inherently, Microsoft now has no excuses at all to release a buggy game. They perhaps could still make some excuses to release a badly written game, a badly thought out game, but there's no excuse for a buggy game to come out when Microsoft has so many support studios and subsidiaries that could help them. Here's interesting. The Berserk manga bookends. Of course, all of this stuff that Dark Horse Direct sells is bookshelf decoration. In a world where maybe you shouldn't have bookshelves in the first place, and if you do have bookshelves, you probably would do better to have books or movies or DVDs or statues or even Lego sets. Like, all of those have a little bit more appeal to me personally than bookends or statues. Poster on the wall might be cool, but also at a certain point, if you get over 25 in age or so, just to pick a number, you look like a child having a poster on the wall of any kind of show. To a lot of people, not everybody. But yeah, not that anybody should be able to shame you into decorating your house however you want to, but it is eventually better to just resolve to have a nice theme to the decoration and of your bookshelves and your house in general, or have a minimalist theme. Most people end up just having a minimalist theme because they don't have that much stuff, and they don't really have anything to highlight. They don't spend a lot of time in their house. I guess I could just scroll down here for days at this rate, looking at all the different things. But yeah, it's kind of surprising that I have never heard of Dark Horse Direct. Anyways, that's enough rambling for today. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.